The year is 2004. After a decade of Kintetsu being in crippling debt, the Osaka Kintetsu Buffaloes and Oryx Blue Wave have decided to merge, shrinking the number of teams in NPB from 12 to 11. Now, it's safe to say that the vast majority of people did not like that this was allowed to go ahead. Not only did both fan bases hate each other, because their entire identities were based on the rivalry between the two clubs, but the players hated it too. It would lead to the first players' strike in NPB history, where the players would walk out on the weekend of September 18th and 19th, 2004, to protest the merger. While they had a long list of demands, their main one was that NPB find a 12th team to put back in the Pacific League and maintain the balance. They threatened to keep striking every weekend until the end of the season if their demands weren't met. NPB caved after a single weekend. See, the league had initially approved the merger because they thought there was no way any company in Japan would buy a baseball team, and the old money owners in the league thought that no one would be able to handle the responsibility of owning a baseball team. They'd already been proven wrong. Firstly, multiple parties had shown a major interest in buying the Buffaloes when the merger was initially announced, most notably ISP and web platform LiveDoor, run by the eccentric Takafumi Horie. But there were others, including newly emerging e-commerce giant Rakuten, headed by Hiroshi Mikitani. And secondly, Hawks owners Daiei had seen the public backlash and backed out of a potential second merger with Lotte in order to sell the team to tech investment group SoftBank. The new money was in fact there and was more than willing to take on the challenge of owning a baseball team. So, after the 2004 season, NPB opened a bidding process for a 12th team, but there would be one condition: the team would have to play in Sendai. Sendai, the capital of Miyagi Prefecture and the unofficial regional capital of Tohoku, was by now the 12th largest city in Japan. It was the only city of over 1 million people that didn't have a team in it or the city next to it. Sendai had also previously hosted a baseball team, with the Lotte Orions playing there from 1973 to 1977. The thing that had caused the Orions to move was not so much lack of interest, but logistics, as Sendai wasn't connected to Japan's high-speed rail network until 1982. They already had a ready-made ballpark in the Miyagi Prefectural Baseball Stadium, which also had hosted the Orions in the 70s. While it was in need of renovation, it could already sit 25,000 people and easily had the space on the property to expand to over 30,000 to keep up with NPB standards. Both Rakuten and LiveDoor put forth bids to start the new team, under the names Sendai LiveDoor Phoenix and the Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles. If you want to know what happened to the LiveDoor bid, Pierre Hedgehog did a video on it, but long story short, LiveDoor's financials were always controversial, while Rakuten had more transparent financials, a better outlook on building baseball in the region, and a realistic plan to expand and renovate Miyagi Stadium. They also already owned J-League side Vissel Kobe, so they had an idea of what it took to run a pro sports team. So Rakuten won. Given that not even 2 years later, LiveDoor would collapse when the scale of their financial irregularities became public, Rakuten was definitely the better choice. The name Tohoku Rakuten Golden Eagles came from a desire to represent the entire region of Tohoku, taking after teams like the Chunichi Dragons and the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters. Golden Eagles are also a common sight in the mountains of Tohoku. Since the name is kinda long and unwieldy, it is often shortened to Rakuten Eagles, even by the club itself. While the initial roster was made up mainly of cast-offs of the Oryx Kintetsu merger, the Eagles would get some star power in the beginning. There were some players that were absolutely disgusted by the merger and thus had refused to play for the Oryx Buffaloes. This gave the Eagles three faces of the franchise from day one: Koichi Isube, Takeshi Yamasaki, and Hisashi Iwakuma. The team's first manager would be Yasushi Tao. Tao had no real professional coaching experience and had mainly served as a baseball analyst on TV throughout the 90s and early 2000s. As we all know, this can only go well. Amazingly, the team would win their first ever game on the road in Chiba, with Hisashi Iwakuma powering through the Marines for a complete game victory. It looked like, despite everything, the Eagles had the makings of a real, legit baseball team. They suffered the worst defeat in NPB history the very next day, losing 26-0. To compound the embarrassment, they almost got no hit in that game until they were saved by a pinch hit single from backup catcher Kenji Nagasaka. They wouldn't win another game until their home opener, when Koichi Isobe opened the scoring with the first home run in club history. they'd take that one 16-5. This was probably the highlight of their season. Takeshi Yamasaki was their only good hitter, and Hisashi Iwakuma was their only good pitcher. The results were predictable. The Eagles finished the year with a .281 winning percentage, 51.5 games back of the Hawks, and 28.5 games back of the Lions for the final playoff spot. It was the second worst defensive unit of all time after the 2003 Oryx Blue Wave, with a team RDEF of negative 109.3. Yikes. As you can imagine, Nyasa Shitao was quickly let go, and in his place they would bring in Katsuya Nomura? Yep, the 71-year-old Nomura had been lured out of retirement to take over as skipper. This was partially a publicity stunt, and partially an attempt by Nomura to salvage his legacy. See, while Nomura had had success managing the Hawks and Swallows, he hadn't really built those teams. And his 3 unsuccessful years with the Hanshin Tigers at the turn of the millennium had made many people doubt his legacy. Plus, Nomura just loved being around baseball, and getting a fat paycheck from Rakuten was a nice bonus. He immediately cleaned house, and Rakuten would focus on signing more players with NPB experience, rather than the minor league cast-offs that had joined the team during the dispersal draft. Jose Fernandez and Rick Short would be brought in to help stabilize the offense. It sort of worked. Sure, the team was still awful and finished nearly 30 games back of the playoffs, but they'd won 9 more games than they had the previous year, so progress is progress. They'd build on it in 2007. Despite having the 3rd worst defensive unit of all time, the Eagles would still finish 4th, thanks in large part to Takeshi Yamazaki smacking 43 homers. He is still the only 40-homer man in club history. Hisashi Iwakuma also finally had help in the form of a teenager from Osaka named Masahiro Tanaka. Rakuten winning the lottery for Tanaka is widely seen as the most important moment in franchise history, and not for no reason. The 1-2 punch of Iwakuma and Tanaka finally made the Eagles competitive. Their historically awful defense was probably the only thing that kept them out of the playoffs. But things would not improve in 2008. So, with the team stagnant, the Eagles looked for outside help, and found it from the Oakland A's, who provided some advice and coaching in spring training. The Eagles would hit the ground running. Masahiro Tanaka was now the unquestioned ace of the club, and the addition of Todd Linden would help Takeshi Yamazaki with the offensive load he had to carry. Tepe Tsuchiya would also break out, putting up the best season by an Eagles position player ever. Yes, it was only a 6-war campaign. The weakness of the position player core will become a theme. The Eagles would make their first playoff appearance that year, finishing 2nd to the Fighters. This meant that Miyagi Stadium was going to host a home playoff game for the first time since October 15, 1977. To give some context on how long that had been, their manager was still an active player in 1977. Sendai showed out for their team's first gasp of success, and they were rewarded. The Eagles crushed the Hawks in the wildcard round to make their first PLCS, where they ran right into the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters and their ace, Yu Darvish. With the two teams being natural rivals fronted by 2 of the most promising young arms in the sport, everyone was expecting fireworks. Hell, Yu Darvish had gone to high school in Sendai, while Masahiro Tanaka had gone to high school in Hokkaido. The storylines wrote themselves. But see, the Fighters had something the Eagles didn't. An offense. They took the series in 4. With that, Katsuya Nomura would retire. He would be replaced by former Hiroshima Cart manager Marty Brown. They immediately crashed down to last place, and Brown would be fired at the end of the season. Seeing that hiring a manager from the 90s had worked last time, the Eagles brought Shinichi Hoshino out of retirement. Hoshino had 3 managerial pennants to his name, but his Dragons and Tigers teams had failed to win the Japan Series each time. He'd even retired after losing the 2003 Japan Series, feeling that any chance he had to win a ring was long gone. He was now 0 for 5 on the whole. In fact, he was part of the 1974 Chunichi Dragons that had famously refused to play Japan Series games in Sendai. The team would get a boost. Not only did they hire Kaz Matsui in his return from MLB, but Hisashi Iwakuma's posting had fallen through, as he'd refused to join the Oakland A's after they'd won the auction for his negotiating rights. But suddenly, baseball became secondary. On March 11, 2011, a massive earthquake and tsunami hit Tohoku's eastern seaboard. Over 28,000 people would lose their lives. Over 15,000 of whom were from Miyagi, the Eagles' home prefecture. The Eagles would immediately start taking donations from fans who visited their preseason games, and when the Eagles came back to Sendai nearly a month later, they were shocked at the devastation that lay before them. Shinichi Hoshino would tour evacuation centers, apologizing profusely to the victims of the earthquake for not bringing his boys home sooner. The Eagles would try and carry the torch for their city into the 2011 season. But despite Masahiro Tanaka putting up the most valuable season in franchise history and winning a Triple Crown, the Eagles still finished 5th, although they only missed the playoffs by 3 games. Hisashi Iwakuma would reach free agency, and much to the dismay of Sendai fans, he would sign with the Seattle Mariners. Most of the other signings were flopping too. The 2012 Eagles were basically Kaz Matsui, Ryo Hijirisawa, and Masahiro Tanaka. That's it. Even then, they still managed to finish 500, just 1 game back of a playoff spot, but it still wasn't what they needed. The feelings of failure were only amplified when Vegalta Sendai made a miracle run to finish 2nd in the J-League and secure a spot in the 2013 AFC Champions League. So, for 2013, they would sign Casey McGee and Andrew Jones to give themselves some offensive firepower, and while they did win the lottery for Yudai Mori in the draft, it would be their 2nd round pick that would make the biggest impact. His name was Takahiro Norimoto. While the team would take a bit of time to gel, by June they were in the fight for first place. They took that first place on July 4th, and never let it go, taking their first place finish in franchise history. Masahiro Tanaka would go undefeated and win his 2nd pitching Triple Crown. Casey McGee would put up just the 2nd 5-WAR campaign by an Eagle ever, and finish 2nd in the PL in home runs. Andrew Jones was 5th. They'd enter their 2nd PLCS with home field advantage and would use it to run over the Marines to make their first Japan series. And they'd be playing the defending champs, the Yomiuri Giants. You'd think that in a year that had seen Vladimir Valentin break the home run record, this Japan series would be a slugfest, right? No. Every game was pitching dominated and low scoring, with Tanaka, Norimoto, and Manabu Mimba on one side, and Tomoyuki Sugano, Toshiya Sugiyuchi, and Tetsuya Utsumi on the other. In Game 6, the Giants would be the ones to break Masahiro Tanaka's unbeaten streak, taking the lead on a 2-run shot in the 5th by Jose Lopez. But Tanaka would get one more chance to secure his legacy. He would be brought in to close out Game 7.
1ボール2ストライク、田中将大追い込んだ。4球目、空振り三振。東北楽天ゴールデンイーグルス球団創設9年目、初めての日本一。雨の仙台で東北が一つになり、そして田中将大が伝説になりました。
Sendai erupted. Their boys had finally done it, and at home no less. Shinichi Hoshino had finally commanded a team to a Japan Series title. Sure, they would lose Tanaka to the Yankees, but Norimoto was more than qualified to take over as their 3rd ace, and he'd prove it by winning 5 Pacific League strikeout titles in a row. But they also lost Casey McGee to the Marlins and had no one to replace him. The Eagles immediately crashed down to last place, and Hoshino would step down. They would promote their minor league manager to replace him, and that was Dave Okubo? Dave Okubo had previously been fired from the Lions for physically abusing players. And as a manager, his first pick in the draft was Tomohiro Anraku. In reality, Okubo was nothing more than a mouthpiece for Mikitani, who inserted himself into the team affairs and was sometimes directly responsible for managerial decisions. The results reflected that. So soon after, the team would go back to hiring a manager who'd won pennants on other teams, this time being Masataka Nashida. With the help of Carlos Peguero and Zealous Wheeler, plus breakout seasons from Agoro Mogi and new superstar closer Yuki Matsui, Nashida did in fact get the Eagles back into the playoffs in 2017. He would dispatch the Lions in the wildcard, only to faceplant in front of Kimiyasu Kudo's Hawks. After a disastrous start to the 2018 season, Nashida would resign, citing meddling from ownership. He would be replaced by Ryosuke Hiraishi, the first former Eagle to manage the squad. Hiraishi got the Eagles back to the playoffs in 2019, and sure, they got beat in the wildcard round by the Hawks, but it was Hiraishi was fired. Yeah, general manager Kazuhisa Ishii said he didn't like the lack of small ball in Hiraishi's game, so he fired him and hired Hajime Miki in his place. Since then, the Eagles have gone through mediocrity-induced hell. They've made one playoff appearance since then. They lost to the Marines. In the 2020s, it's been a rotating door of managers who can't seem to get the team out of 4th place. They have made exactly one starting caliber foreign signing since 2021, Luke Voigt. And even then, his 2026 has been yikes. They've also signed a plethora of over-the-hill free agents, and while most of them have worked out in some way or another, it has been at the expense of player development. That is not to mention the power harassment scandal that ownership turned a blind eye to. Mikitani has also been alternating between meddling with the club and being completely distracted by Vissel Kobe, or just the entire misplaced philosophy of Kazuhisa Ishii as general manager. But Rakuten fans have largely been able to look past that. Because in 2013, the Eagles gave a broken region and a broken people something to cheer about, and something to be proud of. Time will tell if they break out of this funk. Whether that comes from the prospects producing or the team ripping everything down to the studs and starting over, we'll just have to see. Until then, they'll always have that 2013 championship.